Well, apparently people love what they saw from the Eagles rookies at OTAs. They're expecting a lot of them to compete for starting jobs week 1. Also, a surprising cut move, a surprising trade or signing that could be happening for Philadelphia, and Taylor Swift even gets a mention on today's show. I'm Thomas Mott. This is the Thomas Mott Show. What's up, guys? Thomas Mott here. Welcome to the Thomas Mott Show on a Wednesday. Let's start with, of course, the rookie situation coming out of OTAs and looking ahead to more offseason training activities and, of course, training camp coming up. Apparently, they look so darn good, a lot of them could be competing for starting jobs, starting with, of course, Jalen Carter. Now, Carter is the number 9 overall draft pick, and so we expect him to play a bunch on this defensive line. But Bleacher Report thinks there's a very good chance that a couple of weeks into training camp, he could be a starter and a starter for good the remainder of the season, saying this: there's a good chance Carter impresses throughout training camp and preseason and bumps Davis from one of the 2 starting spots at defensive tackle. Those 2 and Cox will all play a lot during the upcoming season, but the former Bulldog may end up being the best of the trio, especially when he gains a bit of NFL experience, end quote. Now, you shouldn't be shocked by this. I think most of us think Jalen Carter will be starting at some point this season, but you got to remember, Jordan Davis was also a top 15 pick, and Jordan Davis needs to be playing a bunch of snaps, especially early on in run situations. Could we see Davis's overall, let's just call it, production level come down a little bit due to the fact that Carter, of course, is now the new hot topic there on the defensive line? Fletcher Cox returns. They have Milton Williams. They signed some other defensive tackles. It's going to be very interesting to see that position battle between former teammates who are used to starting alongside each other. Yes, there's a rotational aspect to the Eagles' defensive line, but this is going to be a very interesting kind of 3-way battle, maybe 4-way battle along the defensive tackle position. Now, the other player, of course, is Nolan Smith, and Nolan Smith doesn't really expect to start right away. However, if you look at the situation in terms of what the Eagles might want to do in Rashawn Desai's new defense, Smith has a very good chance to make an instant impact. Bleacher Report says this, quote, "That won't stop Smith from making an impact, though. He should become part of the edge rushing rotation along with Reddick and several defensive ends such as Sweat, Brandon Graham. Everybody will have the ability to stay fresh because of that depth." He goes on to say Smith, 22, is also a versatile, athletic player who can move around more there on the defense and thrives. Whereas Philly will do that to get the rookie even more involved early in his career. So not only will he rotate, obviously, as a pass rusher, there is kind of this whole quiet conversation about getting him on the football field in more situations than just that. Remember, Hassan Reddick did drop into coverage not often, but a few times last season, most of our chagrin from a defensive play calling perspective from Jonathan Gannon. If they like Nolan Smith's athleticism and his versatility, and they want to find a way to get him on the football field alongside Josh Sweat and Brandon Graham, and even Hassan Reddick, maybe you see him moving around that defensive line, or maybe even dropping into coverage. Not often, but it could be a possibility. Finally, we have Sydney Brown, who most of us think is going to be a very open and really strong competition position for the safety spot for Philadelphia, and Brown has a really good chance of not only impressing early on, but taking over a spot that has no real starter. Here's what Bleacher Report had to say, though, quote, "Brown may also land a starting job, though. He played a lot over his 5-year career with the Fighting Illini and showed his big playability during the final season in 2022 when he nabbed 6 interceptions. That type of spark could be what the Eagles' secondary needs." And you think back to C.J. Gardner-Johnson and what Philadelphia lost with C.J. Gardner-Johnson, it was the interceptions. The coverage was good. I mean, that C.J. Gardner-Johnson isn't the best cover safety in the National Football League, but it was the ability to catch those tip passes across the middle, jump a couple of routes, and land 6 interceptions. And while Edmonds might be a better overall player, if you're looking for that spark, maybe Sydney Brown is going to be the starter when we get to maybe, the end of training camp, or just, a couple of games into the NFL season. What do you guys think? Which of these 3 players has the most chance to play the most snaps on the Eagles defense? Let me know what you guys think down below right now in the comments section. Okay, over here to another interesting report from Bleacher Report. They were basically naming one surprise cut candidate for all 32 NFL teams, and Derek Barnett's name popped up, and it was really, really weird. Take a listen to this. Quote, "At a glance, this may look stunning. Derek Barnett recorded at least 20 pressures from 2019 to 2021 before torn left ACL, ended his 2022 campaign in Week 1. He's an inexpensive player at $31 million and, in my estimation, should be kept. Nevertheless, an edge rushing depth chart headlined by Josh Sweat, Hassan Reddick, Brandon Graham, and first-rounder Nolan Smith wants the conversation," end quote. Now, this to me is more of a conversation about less snaps for Derek Barnett versus just being cut outright. Not like you're going to save a bunch of money by letting him go, but it does kind of draw some interest there if Philadelphia wanted to add somebody else, or they wanted to make a trade trade, as we'll talk about here in just one second, or they just don't think Derek Barnett has the it factor coming off of what was a heavily penalized 2022 season and then not playing in 2023. There, I guess, is some merit to this, but I'd be very surprised because Howie loves his pass rushers, and a former first-rounder at that still has a chance to be at least pretty decent in the Eagles' defensive line. Now, speaking of other players that could be added in terms of Philadelphia and the linebacker position, Myles Jack was linked to Philadelphia via the ESPN article, saying it was the best fit that could possibly happen for Jack. Here's what they said, quote, "Jack seems like an obvious fit. 27-year-old was originally drafted by the Jaguars in 2016, and their general manager at the time was David Caldwell, who now works for the Eagles. Jack's calling card has typically been his range and coverage, but his numbers haven't been impressive over the past couple of years. He's allowed passer ratings marks north of 100 in his final season with the Jaguars and his lone season with the Steelers. The teams paid Jack a combined $17.8 million over the past 2 seasons, but a big money deal is not going to happen in Philadelphia or anywhere else in 2023. If Jack wants to continue playing, though, the Eagles would be an ideal landing spot in terms of national attention. Philly's deep defensive line should also keep his blockers off of Jack, giving him the best possible chance to make plays. Many Jaguar fans would argue Jack was unfairly denied a chance to go to the Super Bowl, and going to the Eagles would give the linebacker his best opportunity to make one this season." Now, the argument here is fair. Philadelphia does maybe need some help on the linebacker position group. Maybe Jack could go ahead and flourish in what is going to be a high-flying, very impressive defensive line that creates a lot of tackling and coverage opportunities for the linebackers, but I think you would have to really take a massive pay cut in order to sign with Philadelphia. And I do think the Eagles love Nicholas Morrow. We always talk about how Nakobe Dean this, Nakobe Dean that. He's going to step up here and there. You still have Davion Taylor. You still have Sean Bradley and the Bears' leading tackler last year in Morrow. And so I think Philadelphia, if they make a linebacker move, it'll happen during training camp once they realize they don't have what they need. If Howie Roseman is out there at camp and he's looking around and he goes, wait a second, the linebackers aren't that good, then he makes a move for a Jack or, Isaiah Simmons or a Patrick Queen that we've talked about here. But it wouldn't happen now because they feel confident in what they have just based off a couple of OTA practices and obviously hanging around the guys, most of which were on the roster minus Morrow back in 2022. Now, speaking of linebackers, how about this tweet here from Hugh Douglas, the former Philadelphia Eagle? How about shout out to Real Thomas Mott for the cool hats? There you go. Ike Reese rocking the Billy Green System hat, or the Kelly Green System hat here in this picture at the 94 WIP studio. Shout out Ike, speaking of linebackers there. And of course, Hugh Douglas hosted some shows with Hugh Douglas back in the day when I hosted on 92.9 The Game in Atlanta. But everybody's got the Philly hat. You can pick yours up, white or black, still available at phillyhat.com. You can look just like Ike, maybe even a little bit better. I found a very interesting article here talking about each grade that every team in the offseason had and where they stand going into 2023. And what I thought was very, very interesting is this article from SI.com says the Giants had the best offseason in the entire division, which I thought was a little bit strange because I didn't see the Giants as having the best offseason in the division, and the Philadelphia did. And I was like, okay, what's going on here? Let's break it down. So here are the additions for the Giants: Deontay Banks, Paris Campbell, Jalen Hyatt, Bobby McCain, John Michael Schmitz, Bobby Okereke, A'Shawn Robinson, and Darren Waller. And of course, they lost Julian Love and John Feliciano. Now, what's interesting, though, the projected win total for the Giants is only 8.5. But when you read the final grade and what they have to say about him here on SI.com, they say this, quote, "The Giants had the best offseason in the division, but they're still a tier below the Eagles and Cowboys when it comes to rosters. Jones will need to build off his promising 2022 season and build quick chemistry with his new targets and center." So he says they have the best offseason, but their roster's not as good. But is it a better offseason than just below here where you see Philadelphia and they say they added Sidney Brown, Jalen Carter, Terrell Edmonds, Rashad Penny, Nolan Smith, DeAndre Swift? You would think that that was a better overall offseason. I guess you lost some people in the key subtraction category, but giving them a worse offseason grade than the Giants to me was very, very surprising. Here's what they say, quote, "Philly lost many key players in free agency, but retaining quarterbacks James Bradbury and Darius Slay will keep this team in position to return to the Super Bowl. They might not have a glaring hole in the Eagles roster, but they're gambling on inexperienced players, such as second-year linebacker Nakobe Dean, Juergens, Davis, and Brown to fill the void of key departures. With a veteran core of Cox, Kelsey, and defensive end Brandon Graham, the young players should flourish under their guidance to make the Eagles a dominant force once again in the NFC." Okay, so he didn't actually, hate on the Eagles, but I still disagree with the fact that Giants had a better overall offseason. The Giants got better, but every team in the NFC East got better. I mean, even the Cowboys, I think, got a little bit better as well, as much as I don't want to say it. But Philadelphia should still be the cream of the crop, and I think most people would agree with that, including ESPN Get Up's Ryan Clark, as he ranked his top 5 NFC teams, and I think did a pretty darn good job, as you see it here. Eagles 1, Niners 2, Cowboys 3, Seahawks 4, then Lions. Seattle's going to be the dark horse team, I think, in the NFC. Everyone's going to say that the Lions are going to do that. The Lions are going to be good. They're not going to surprise anybody here, but Seattle can go far if Geno Smith plays well. That's just the question mark. Can Geno Smith play well? Because the second half of the season, he didn't really play that well, hence why they didn't give him a mega massive contract that keeps him as the starter for the next 10 years. It's more of like a short-term deal that gets him happy that could become longer if he plays better. But their offseason, talk about draft, they did a very, very good job. But Clark's overall top 5, I think, is very impressive. Now, another article that I think goes into this whole ranking idea is the NFL.com's article saying the 2023 season, Bengals and Eagles among teams likeliest to replace Chiefs as Super Bowl champs. And this whole article gets into this idea of who are the best options to win the Super Bowl in 2023, and the Bengals actually come in at number 1, whereas Philadelphia comes in at number 2. Now, the argument for the Bengals, as you see on your screen here, is that their overall record against the Chiefs the past 2 seasons. The two teams have played 4 games in that span, including the playoffs, and the Bengals have only lost once. So, by definition, they have a better chance of beating the Chiefs in order to get to a Super Bowl, which I guess makes sense, although they did lose this past year, and so it's not like Joe Burrow's never lost to the Chiefs. But then you get down here to number 2, and Philly has a pretty fair assessment, I would say. The Eagles still look like the class of the NFC after an offseason that was far more encouraging than perhaps most expected. Following their loss to the Chiefs in Super Bowl 57, several critical personnel decisions awaited. Philly took its hits in free agency, including the loss of valuable contributors like defensive tackle Javon Hargrave, running back Miles Sanders, and safety C.J. Gardner-Johnson, but also held on to other key veterans, center Jason Kelce, defensive end Brandon Graham, and cornerback Darius Slay and James Bradbury. The draft was good to the Eagles, who found defensive tackle Jalen Carter and edge rusher Nolan Smith in the first round and traded for Lions running back DeAndre Swift on day 3. Now they go into this idea that, of course, it's all going to determine what happens based on Jalen Hurts continuing the MVP type season he had last year going forward in 2023, but I do think it's fair enough that, okay, put him at 2, but they should at least be in the top 2 and not anywhere further below in terms of teams that can upset the Chiefs going into the 2023 season. Final story here, very quickly. Taylor Swift was having her concert, either was it the Eras Tour? I'm not a Swiftie. My girlfriend can correct me a little bit later on today when she watches this show, but she was at the Linc performing her, I believe, Eras Tour, and I guess there's this whole idea of Taylor Swift from Philly is an Eagles fan, and she finally confirmed it. So if you like that sort of thing, here it is.
It was sort of I don't know how large the debate was, but I did see the debate about I have a lyric that says, with my Eagles t-shirt hanging. And I saw some people wondering if it was the band the Eagles or the team the Eagles. And I love the band the Eagles. The guy's like, come on, like I'm from Philly, of course it's the team.
I know that you needed that in your day. I know that you needed to hear Taylor Swift say she's an Eagle fan in order to continue on with your workday and continue on with your life. And so I am here to provide that for you. If you, of course, appreciate that, give the show a thumbs up. All right, Wednesday, Linc Live tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Myself and Josh Davis with a special show as we get into the roster battles, the rookie stuff I talked about on today's show, and much, much more. Don't be late. Going to have a lot of fun. And, of course, gives you a lot more chances to enter into our Eagles tickets giveaway that's going to be happening towards the start or really the end of training camp. Plenty more stuff happening the next couple of days and weeks. I'm Thomas Mott. This has been the Thomas Mott Show.